Hi and welcome everyone to this episode of UI5ers Live. And this episode is all about testing, or more specifically about running tests. So with the deprecation of the test runner Karma, the discussion has arisen about what we should use instead in the UI5 world and showing the various options for that. That's the goal of this episode. And for this, we are joined by two very special guests who are experts in this topic and show what they have developed in this area. So first, let me welcome Arno Buchholz. He's based in Montreal, Canada, where it's been snowing already, we heard. Good morning, Arno.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon for the rest of the world.
I will also introduce Mauricio Laufer. So Mauricio, hello. You are based in Brisbane, Australia, I think, where it's already past midnight. So good evening or also good morning. Hi, Mauricio.
That's correct. Hi, everyone. Yeah, straight from Down Under, just past midnight here, but still awake.
Right. So both do work at SAP now, but what they did and what they will present is basically a contribution to UI5, a community contribution, because they are not like working in the UI5 framework area, but they are basically users of UI5. They are part of the community, like all of you who are watching now. And as such, they are community members, and their contributions are even more precious and appreciated than just something provided out of the framework. And as always, by the way, we have Peter Music, UI5's chief architect. Hi, Peter.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, and I, Andreas Kunz, will be your moderator today. But without further ado, let's hand over to Peter, who will set the stage and explain what this is about and what the situation is with this Karma and test runner stuff.
So, as Andreas said, the Karma test runner has been deprecated, I think, now quite a while ago already. And till then, we always communicated, and I said it always on stage also, that as long as we don't see big problems, we continue to support Karma for testing. But recently, a lot of things have been changed in the world of Karma, and especially in the world of the browser, so that the Karma runner is not really properly working anymore in that context for testing. And therefore, we also announced now recently that also our Karma-UI5 support, so the adoption or the integration of the UI5 test runner testing into the Karma runner has been now deprecated. The reason for that, I just want to give a quick explanation, and then we also hand over to the two alternatives for the Karma runner, is that we recently discovered that one of the other browsers are now really having problems with Karma. And these problems, they can't be handled without really getting support from the Karma developer or from the Karma team to improve Karma itself to get these browsers running again properly. Also, Karma said, this is also one thing which I find pretty interesting, maybe coming back to that they say the web testing space has now been evolved so much in the last years that there are now better tools available, and especially also, and that's what I also noticed, more performant alternatives are available to Karma, which provide a better value. And having said this, today we will have two of the alternatives which could be used as a kind of a drop-in replacement for the Karma test runner on top of the UI5 testing, which still stays QUnit testing. And we also continue to have the OPA testing support, but it's mainly about executing them in an automated way. And therefore, one solution is the UI5 test runner, which may have been used already by one of you, because Arno presented this topic quite often already in the context of UI5. And he also wants to give us an introduction into that today again. And there's also Mauricio then afterwards, who will show us the wdio-qunit-service, which also enables automated testing for our QUnit and OPA tests. We will see that now together. But without further talking, I hand over to Arno. Let's get started to show the UI5 test runner.
So in order to demonstrate the use of the UI5 test runner, I decided to go with the OpenUI5 sample app, which recently integrated UI5 test runner. So they did the migration from Karma to UI5 test runner. And I wanted to show how easy it was to do that. So right now, if I look at the code, we are still using Karma. And I will ask you to trust me on the fact that it still works, but I don't want to lose time on just showing how Karma runs. At least I just want you to see the results of Karma. So I will just use Karma CI, which is at the moment when this project was using Karma, how you would run the automated test in the CI/CD pipeline. So as you can see, Karma just executes everything. You get a console log that will show you the current progress of the execution. And on top of that, there are also some coverage information that is being extracted so that at the end of the test, you get coverage information. Then this sample app was evolved in order to integrate UI5 test runner. And I like this commit because that's actually the commit that was needed to do the migration. And that clearly highlights what is needed to be done for a simple application like this one to be migrated to UI5 test runner. So typically, you can see that in the git ignore, a new folder has been added because out of the box, UI5 test runner will generate a report folder, and I will explain the content of it. And then from the scripting point of view, inside the package.json, you can see that everything that relates to Karma has been removed, and then new scripts were added in order to integrate UI5 test runner. If you compare the commands needed to execute Karma versus the commands needed to execute UI5 test runner, there is one big difference because the team decided to integrate UI5 test runner with what I call the remote mode, which means that the application is served using UI5 CLI, and then UI5 test runner is requested to test the application that is already running on a given URL. So that's what you can see here. The test UI5 command will use start server and test to first trigger the npm run command start that will use UI5 serve to serve the application. Then this URL will indicate the start server and test to check if this URL is available. So it will ping it on a regular basis. And as soon as the URL is being available, which means UI5 serve started correctly, then it triggers this command, test runner coverage, which will execute UI5 test runner. The port here is not really relevant here, but what is relevant is the URL being used, which indicates to the UI5 test runner where to find the test files to be executed. And I will discuss the coverage information later. So let's go back to the main branch here and execute this. So I will need to update the installations, the packages which are installed, and then I will run UI5, and you will see what happens. So compared to Karma, we still have also some console log traces, which indicates the current progress of the execution. It was quite fast, but something that you may not realize is that actually the unit test, the QUnit test and the OPA test are executed in parallel. Since the OPA tests are taking longer, that's the reason why we see only the OPA test here, but the QUnit tests were already executed. Usually they are way faster.
Yeah, that's what I saw it quickly, at least in the beginning, that it immediately disappeared again. It was just quickly visible.
Yes. So here you can see the report being generated by the UI5 test runner on the output. So you see the two URLs being tested. There is a small icon indicating if it's OPA or QUnit, and then you have the number of tests being executed successfully. And you also have the same coverage information. The idea here is while executing, the UI5 test runner generating the report folder. And this report folder is really important because it contains a lot of information you can use or look into if you need to troubleshoot what happened during the execution of the UI5 test runner. One file I would like to show you immediately is the output.txt. This is the kind of output you will see inside the CI/CD pipeline. So the UI5 test runner is capable of detecting if it's running on the command line or inside a control execution like in the CI/CD, and it will produce this output so that you get all the information you need to understand what happened. So here we see that it started by probing the URL test suite, which allowed him to detect that you have two pages to execute. And here you can see the two URLs which were executed with the timeline so that you can also see how fast those tests were executed. And you have this strange code here, which associates a folder within the report folder that contains all the debugging information related to this execution. So that's pretty interesting if you need to troubleshoot. For instance, for the QUnit test, you can see here that we have the network traces which are listed, the console traces which are listed. So if you need to debug, you have a lot of information that you can gather. On top of the output.txt, there is a report.html, which actually is visible here. So this report will summarize all the test execution and will provide you information about what happened and all the assertions which were executed. So this one is not really demonstrative. It's because the assertion doesn't contain any message. But if you go back to the OPA test, also what is interesting is that out of the box, this runner will capture screenshots during the execution so that you can associate the assertion to the current state of the application. So that's pretty nice. If you need to debug something that is going wrong, you can actually follow the execution of the application by seeing all the state of the application during the assertions.
Yeah, most often the screenshots were really more helpful than looking into the logs.
That's correct. However, you have to be aware that taking screenshots during the execution has a cost on performances. So some teams decided to remove the screenshots using no screenshot parameter. But what happens is that the UI5 test runner still takes a screenshot whenever a test fails. That allows you to at least see the state of the application when a test fails. So what you have seen here is actually what I call the remote mode. Again, the idea is that the test runner doesn't serve the application. Instead, it will execute the test on an already served application. So the value of that is that if you are dependent on UI5 CLI, where some advanced configuration inside the UI5.yaml, the UI5 test runner fully support that. However, if you don't use UI5 CLI, and if you have a project structure like this one, where you have a web app folder, a test folder containing the test suite QUnit.html, actually you can also use another mode of the test runner, which is called the legacy mode, where actually the test runner can act as a web server also for your application. So here, this application could also use this legacy mode. In order to trigger it, I don't start UI5 CLI, I just execute UI5 test runner. UI5 test runner. And in order to extract coverage information, I will use coverage also. And when I do that, actually, the UI5 test runner will start a web server that will serve the UI5 application based on the current structure. And then it can run the test almost the same way as what happened with UI5 CLI tools. I said almost the same way because since it's no more served by the UI5 CLI tool, everything related to coverage or to, let's say, mapping the UI5 resources is handled by the UI5 test runner. So for the coverage, typically you can see here that the runner instrumented the source files before executing the test. And then what it does is that during the execution, it will serve the instrumented files instead of the source files so that it can gather the coverage information. However, out of the box, because all the files were instrumented, you can see that the coverage includes everything. And that's the reason why when they did the migration to the UI5 test runner, even if they don't use the legacy mode, they added this additional configuration to exclude some of the files from the coverage information. You can do something similar with the UI5 test runner in the legacy mode using a configuration file respecting the NYC syntax, so the nyc.json, so that you can exclude some of the patterns. You can specify some patterns to include some files to be monitored by coverage so that you get the coverage information that relates only to what you need. That's pretty much what I wanted to show you today. So main difference between legacy and remote mode. Remote mode, you have your UI5 application that is already served, and you use UI5 test runner to connect to it and run the test. Or you have the legacy mode. If you're not familiar with UI5 CLI, then the UI5 test runner can take care of serving your application and do whatever needs to be done. Just to conclude, the UI5 test runner is quite versatile. If I show you the list of options it contains quite a lot, because the example I showed you is really simple. There are no dependencies, no external libraries or whatsoever. It's not even a library. But the UI5 test runner is increasing its support to manage other kind of configurations, such as library testing. So now I have some teams contacting me for library testing, and we find solutions with UI5 test runner to make it work the right way. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show you
Thanks a lot, Anu. That's awesome. Yeah, before we come to like discussing what should who use in which case, let's first give Mauricio the chance to show what kind of alternative have you created.
And I will start from a different approach. I will start because my approach to the tool it's quite different from Arnold. So what I have created is not a full-blown test runner. I'm just creating a plugin that extends WebDriver I/O capabilities. So WebDriver, it's been used by a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So people developing React, Angular, Vue, anything plus UI5 and Fiori as well. So yeah, so WebDriver I/O is quite famous. Everybody has been using. So I said, yeah, why not? Why not just create a plugin for that? Then on that, we have wdio-i5. So if anybody doing end-to-end tests in Fiori UI5 apps today, they are using wdio-i5, which is the official tool for end-to-end tests. So wdio-i5 is also just a plugin, or I shouldn't say just, sorry, Volker, but it's also a plugin to WebDriver I/O, extending WebDriver I/O capabilities to better cater for UI5 needs. And then based on everything that I just said, I decided to create my extension, my plugin that would support key unit testing with WebDriver I/O. I would say the main difference here is that the service that I have created, it's not UI5 specific. So if you have whatever application running with key unit, and then again, it could be Ember, it could be Angular, it could be just some vanilla JavaScript or some vanilla jQuery libraries that we are extending or creating. You can use that library for testing. So it doesn't need to be on UI5 only. For sure, this is going to be on the UI5 space. It also covers unit testing in UI5. It also covers integration tests with OPA in UI5. So everything that we have been doing before in running in Karma, we can run with my plugin here. So that's I would say the difference in the approach that we took. So I'm just extending something that somebody else has created, and a lot of others communities or different JavaScript communities have adopted, which is WebDriver I/O. Then in terms of the capabilities, because as I said, I'm just doing a little bit, a tiny little bit on that whole testing runner environment. So if we start looking into different reporting or different capabilities for the test that you want to do, then you look into what is available for WebDriver I/O communities. So rather than extending my plugin together for all different needs, like recording a video, taking screenshots, posting to Teams, posting to Slack channels, or posting and sharing the reports in different ways, I would just go to WebDriver I/O and look into the reporters that we have available in there. So if I want to have a Cucumber-like reporting, that's all right. I can pick one here. If I want to post to a team city, then I just pick this report and install that as a dependency in my project. So this is how we extend WebDriver I/O. So it's just creating services, plugins around that core, around the test runner. And then one of the really good things that we have in WebDriver I/O is that you can test pretty much all the different browsers. And this is going to test the real browser. So it's not going to test. You can test Chromium, you can test WebKit, but you can also test Chrome for real. You can test Edge for real, Firefox and Safari. So it supports all browsers, whatever you have installed in your machine, or even remote browsers. If you are testing via Browser Stack or Sauce Labs, you can also use WebDriver I/O with the plugin that I have created for UI5 or for QUnit testing. And if you start looking into other capabilities, not just reporting, but let's see what we have in here. If you want to get, for example, testing mobile, even if it's a web application, but in mobile, testing a real service on a real mobile device, then I can use Appium. As I said, I have Browser Stack here to connect to remote browsers. We have pretty much whatever you need to run in here. If you need a static server, so you want to have this standalone web server, you can use this service in here. If this one is the Wi-Fi one, is wdio-i5, and then at the bottom here we can see the QUnit-service, which is my plugin. So extending WebDriver IO, it's quite easy, quite simple. We have a lot of things. We have much more than we have covered in here in their page. If you go to NPM, you see a lot of different things. Then going back to Wi5 now and QUnit pages or tests, we have our traditional regular QUnit pages testing whatever we need in Wi5. So here I'm also using sample Wi5, the app that everybody knows. So this is the QUnit page, and this is the OpenUI5 page. So nothing different, nothing special, whatever we have been doing before. Then here on the right side, we have OpenUI5 sample app. And then this is my plugin. If you are not using wdio-i5 for end-to-end tests today, you need to install quite some dependencies. So I'm installing WebDriver IO, the CLI, the test runner, and then this is the reporter that I want to use. And then, as I said, everything that I want to use, I just install that plugin. I just install that new dev dependency. So I want to use the spec reporter, nothing fancy. And then I want to use my service as well. And then I have created just script entry in here. Then what we need to do, again, if you are using wdio-i5 today, you just need to add a new service. You just need to add this new entry for your WebDriver IO conf. If you don't use wdio-i5 today, then you need to create this file. And this file, you're just going to say, okay, this is where you are going to find all my tests. This is my test suite, so I can break down or run just the test that I want, so I don't need to run everything. And then in this case, I would run everything, and running suites, I would just run my unit tests, and with this one, I would just run my integration OPA tests. The browser that I'm testing here is Chrome. I have some parameters in here saying that I want to run this as a headless. I don't want to see the browser opening up and looking into the screen. And I could test this at the same time across different browsers and different versions. So for example, I could add another entry here and then say, I want to test Firefox, and then I would test not just Chrome, but I would test and span all my tests in 2 different browsers at the same time running in parallel. So there's no need to create different files and different things for different browsers. So it's just configuration. You say whatever is the browser, whatever is the configuration that you need to or you want to run and execute, and that's it. Then this is another little bit that you need to do. So you need to create the tests file or the spec files. And then in this case, I'm just using Mocha. So I'm using scribe it, and then I launch whatever is my URL as we have here on the left side on the browser. And then I say, yeah, go to this guy and get the QUnit results. So this is pretty much getting all the results for QUnit, pretty much what we have in here. It's a different report. It maps to what we have in Mocha, and then we get the results. So going to the execution, I would say, for example, just run everything. And then while this is running, I will just show the HTML one, which is, as I said, is just regular HTML with QUnits, whatever we have been doing before. So here I'm using QUnit 2, but I could also use QUnit 1 if I want to, or if I have some old Wi-Fi apps that I want to support and I want to test using WebDriver IO, then yeah, I just change that to QUnit 1 and that should be fine. So there's nothing special in here. There's nothing special in the test files itself. So the only difference is these tests.js, and then this could be test.js, it could be ESM, it could be CJS, and it can also be TypeScript. So if you are into TypeScript and writing your tests in TypeScript, so there's no need, when you are using a WebDriver IO, there's no need for transpilation. You can write all your tests in TypeScript straight away and leverage and use whatever types you have for your project. So now here we have executed. So we can see we have two workers being executed because we have two files. We have one file for units, and we have another file for integration, which is our OPA. So this means that these two workers, they are running in parallel, so they don't need to wait one for the other. I changed the log level to warning, so I can see this one saying that the key unit reporter has been injected. So this is the report that I inject before the page has been launched. So for example, if we look in here, this is what the plugin is doing. You don't need to know to do or to know this, but it's just for curiosity. Every time that we launch an URL, we are going to inject the key unit reporter, and then that key unit reporter is going to be mapped into the Mocha or whatever framework we are using with WebDriver IO.
So basically, at the end, the test files are really only the kind of the proxies. Yeah, you define which test pages you are opening, and then you'd say, yeah, grab the results and use that for the reporting.
Exactly. So there's no need to change anything in the tests that you have today. If you have written 1,000 different tests with your JavaScript key unit files, there's no need to touch that. This is just pretty much pointing to the URL where we are going to find this HTML page with the tests running. So it's pretty much pointing to the browser. That's it. No need to change your project. No need to change the code. Then let me just go back here. Because I have selected spec as reporter, so this is just a console. If I want to have this as an HTML reporter or a timeline reporter, as I said, we can go to the services, we can go to the extensions, to the plugins, and select and install whatever we need. And the beauty, again, with WebDriver IO, because it's composable, I can have all different reports at the same time. I can have spec, I can have video, I can have timeline, I can have HTML, JSON, JUnit, whatever I need to have or to get, I can get this from the community. And if it's not there, if you want to create some crazy report format, then you can create your own and extend WebDriver IO. So we just move now to the configurations or to the options. So for example, I want to have coverage, test coverage. So there is a plugin for that. And then this is the configuration. I could get this out of the box, so I don't need to have this filter, but I will explain why we have this filter. So in this one, I will just run again. And then this filter here, because we are using out of the box, the report, it's V8. So I'm not using Istanbul. There's no instrumentation whatsoever. I don't need to have, for example, you can see here, I have removed the middleware in UI5 where we have the instrumentation for Istanbul. So there's no need for that because I'm just leveraging V8 itself. There's no, again, instrumentation. There's no transpilation for the code. I just get the bytecode usage embedded from V8. And then in here, because this would get out of the box everything, I just filtering. I don't want to get coverage for this path. I don't want for this path, and I don't want for this path, but I want everything else. And then I'm going to get not just JavaScript coverage, but also CSS files coverage. So if I have created some CSS files and they are in there, but they're not doing anything, then I would know. So let me just move this one around. And then let me just grab the path in here, which I should get. And for sure, I can't see the folder because we are live. Come on. Let me try the code one. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I think at the end also definitely what we will see is that there will be the coverage result inside. You showed also that with WebDriver IO, for sure, you have a kind of a community also behind the test runner, which provides a lot of extensions. And this is also something which is quite a value. While you are running this, I think, are you done with the presentation mostly?
Just another comment. So this is another configuration. So I said that we need to create these files here, right? This the configuration plus the test file or the spec file. But there is one option when I say that no specs or clean config, whatever we want to call this, where I create my service and then I pass the paths. So rather than calling the paths in here, I just list all the paths in here, and then there's no need to create these files. So this would be just the configuration and the list of the paths that I want to execute, and that's all.
There is also this question arising: what should the people really use now? Because for sure it's now a choice. It's not anymore a clear recommendation from our side. And we had this year a meetup event. Which Volker made a connection to Christian Broman, so he's the guy of WebDriver.io, and he also talked a little bit about the differences between the browsers. So there are between the test runners for browsers, and at the end there is we have three different pillars. We have a WebDriver-based test runner, which is WebDriver.io or Night Shift and Selenium, yeah. Which is using this WebDriver protocol to communicate with a regular browser, and this allows you to have really a browser testing. There are also emulation-based testing, like what Cypress is doing. So they, at the moment, they require specific Chromium versions, and I think also, I don't remember anymore what all. So there's only a limited set. I know that Safari and IE is not supported, but for sure who uses IE. In this case, the Cypress needs to have some specialities then in the browser to run that. And there are the DevTools alternatives. That's what Puppeteer is doing, and others, which integrate via the DevTools into the browser as such and report the information. So the most native one, I would say, is a WebDriver-based protocol for sure. But if it's enough for you for testing to do it also with the other kind of testing frameworks, then for sure this is okay. I just want to mention that I thought this is quite interesting to know about these differences here. And yeah, I just picked up this one slide from the presentation he made. But I think now, as everyone is waiting here in the call for the what to choose, Arnaud and Mauricio created a kind of a overview on what is the difference between the different test runners. Let's leave the Karma column aside and concentrate a little bit on the other columns. So from the architecture perspective, we have two different kind of architectures. I don't know, we didn't talk too much about how to do it. So, but maybe if every one of you want to talk a little bit about these columns, then quickly go over them and we talk about that.
Okay, sure. So I guess Maurizio really clearly explained that the solution he proposes is more like a plugin within WebDriver.io. So it comes with the community tools of WebDriver.io, where on the other side, my UI5 test runner is a standalone product. So it's more like a self-sufficient tool, which means that it doesn't have the lots of extension as you would have with this WebDriver.io.
But it's not necessary, or if it does what it should do, then you don't need it, and
that's okay also.
Yeah, what is one nice thing, what I remember also from your side, that's also where you have this one thing in the screenshots and video part below, like you mentioned Playwright, so you can have different test runners underneath at the end.
Yes,
yeah?
So something interesting is that if you relate to the slide you just presented, everything about Selenium WebDriver, Playwright, there was also other things, also Puppeteer. So these are all supported by UI5 Test Runner. I didn't mention it, but actually you can tell UI5 Test Runner which driver to be used to automate the browser. So that comes with some additional settings such as video recording, for instance, with Playwright. Yes, that's correct.
So on the other hand side, if you look into the wdio, there you have the community support. So for screenshots and video, right, there are a lot of plugins available, or at least a plugin for each available, and you just need to configure it like you have shown for the coverage part, right? So in one of the biggest differences I also see between both test runners is that we have this configuration-free part of the UI5 test runner, and due to the fact that we are using WebDriver.io on the wdio-qunit-service side, we have this wdio-conf.js, which is necessary, but it's pretty small at the end.
And just to mention, you can also create a configuration file for the runner, but it's not required.
Yeah, because you just detect this by convention, then more or less.
Yeah, there are lots of defaults, which makes it not necessary, yes.
Yeah. From a reporting perspective, I think also here both are very extensible, or you have your standalone reports you showed today, but you can also have these JUnit reports, right? And,
yes, so unfortunately, as of today, you have to code it. So I provide within the test runner a JUnit XML report, I would say transformer, so that you can get such report. But I got also requests to generate the Cucumber JSON file. So I would need to develop it typically, because as of now, the output of the UI5 test runner is not standardized. So it's like an internal format that needs to be converted to the expected one.
And for the VDIO, we have this JUnit HTML format. That's also what you typically show in this examples, Mauricio, or?
Exactly. Yeah. This everything is gonna be captured by WebDriver.io itself, and then people will just map to whatever formats they want to. So we have the traditional and the usuals: JUnit, JSON, XML, HTML, consoles. But then we also have some, let's say, a little bit more advanced ones, posting to Slack channels, posting to Teams channels, sending via PDF, sending via emails. So we have a lot of different ways in reporting and posting those results. But then everything it's a plugin, everything it's an extension from the community itself.
Yeah, thank you. On a debugging perspective, I think both are comparable. Or that's what I see here. So on that sec, but the most important part is the performance, because this was also one thing I mentioned in the beginning where Karma really lack. That they had this sequential execution of that, and here I see in both cases we have a kind of a parallel execution. You call it per file, Mauricio, and on the UI5 test runner, Arno, how is it there? Can you also per test, or is it also per file?
Well, actually, I would say one advantage of UI5 test runner is that you don't need to tell the runner how to split the files. So there is this command, this parameter split OPA, which will detect, well, first of all the test pages are isolated, but also when you run the OPA page, with this option, it will detect the different journeys inside your OPA test and will execute them separately. So that's something that is, I would say, convenient, because you don't have to configure it. You just use the option and it will split automatically everything.
Yeah, and then on the WebDriver.io, it's also out of the box, so there's no need to do anything. So for every file that you have, this is going to be a new worker. This is going to be a new execution.
And I think this is a clear benefit of both of them, that we really have pure parallelism of tests. Yeah, now. Yeah, from the server part, you showed the standalone server thing and also the CLI support. So this is clear, works for both. One thing, as we had the last UI5ers Live talked about the test starter support. This is, I think, also interesting to know. The new test starter, this is more a runtime thing for UI5 to execute the tests. And here the UI5 test runner, it can run on that. We didn't really, I just asked Arno before the session, before the webinar today. He had some places where it works already, but we didn't test it extensively. So, but the new test starter is also not really the idea. In this case, yeah, you have seen what Mauricio showed, that we have these individual tests, or also the same I would then see also for the UI5 test runner, that the test starter, like the tests execute, or the test definition for the individual test runners. Here, this is the same foundation, and it's more the kind of the automation to execute the whole thing. But for sure, a support for that, this could be developed. Yeah, that's maybe also nice that we have at the aim and the same configuration then used across all test runners.
If you are going to use a test runner, and then if the test runner is UI5 test runner or QUnit-service for WebDriver or whatever else, but we have a proper test runner, the test starter, in my opinion, doesn't make a lot of sense, because everything that we are doing, especially in the configuration for the test starter, it's responsibility for the test runner. So the test starter is pretty much just a test runner in browser. And then you kind of have two different test runners. You have your proper test runner running on the node's execution orchestration sides, but then you also have the test starter in the browser trying to manage how you execute your files.
The only thing which comes in addition with the test starter is really that it also brings in some environmental information, which QUnit version to be used and stuff like that. That's also a point maybe just for everyone to know about QUnit v1 versus v2. It's more about the asynchronity of the testing. In v2, we have true async, real async support, also returning promises and stuff like that. So that's also the reason why this is a different major version. And yeah, for sure, that's also the reason why v1 is deprecated. So you should write async test, ideally, if possible, also to overall speed up the execution of that. The coverage support is something we have seen today. So this is also quite possible. But maybe the last row here, it talks about browser automation support. So we have on the one hand side multiple. What does that mean, Arno?
That's a fundamental difference, I guess, because as I mentioned, the UI5 test runner relies on drivers to automate the browser. So I integrated Puppeteer, Selenium WebDriver, even GSDOM, but just for fun because it doesn't work very well. And you have WebDriver IO, Playwright, but what I want to say is that then, depending on the browser you want to automate, you might have to switch between those drivers. I see the value of WebDriver QUnit-service here because WebDriver IO is a complete framework that allows you to automate any browser. So, but yeah, that's the main difference.
And all in WebDriver OSide is also that what we have seen with the WebDriver API and the communication, what is available with a native browser, it's a kind of different communication channel than here. Overall, now the question is, what do we recommend the people to use? Yeah, it's a choice. Yeah, you have on the one hand side the UI5 test runner, which is a kind of a drop-in replacement to your UI5 application or library to run your tests, the existing tests automatically. Or you have WebDriver IO, where you need to have a bit of configuration, I would see. WebDriver O is something, if you already use, let's say, wdio-5, we didn't mention that as part of that because it's an end-to-end testing tool, but if you have already WebDriver somehow used because of using wdio-5, then also maybe the wdio-qunit-service makes sense to drop that in because it's not so far then anymore. You have already configuration, and you can also use that as part of that. But what do you think, Arno and Mauricio? What's your opinion on that?
You're correct. So I think it's a choice. So it's people would need to test and see whatever they feel more comfortable with. If the features that they are looking into defined in the test runners, if the reports or whatever parallel execution or whatever else they want to see, or for example, test starter is supported by Arnold test runner, it's not supported in mine. So if you are using test starter and you don't want to give up on that, then this is going to be the way to go. So you have to use test runner as is today. So perhaps tomorrow I change my mind and I decide to include, or somebody in the call today may create a PR and add that capability to my plugin. But I think it's testing, looking, feeling, and then whatever you feel more comfortable, then you pick and choose.
I was about to say that if you already use WebDriver IO and you're quite familiar with the configuration of it, it might be a good option to look into WebDriver IO QUnit-service because you're already familiar with the tool. But if I know many teams where they just want to replace Karma with something and they're not necessarily familiar with WebDriver IO, for that kind of situation, I would say maybe UI5 Test Runner is easier to do the migration. But as Mauricio said, I believe it's worth testing to validate what you get out of them and to see what really fits your needs.
Even if you are not using WebDriver IO today, it's quite simple. It's just a configuration file and dependencies. So there's no need to change the code base. There's no need to change your tests.
This is exactly what we have seen today. So this is nice for both alternatives, and I think that's also for the vision for the future of the whole test runner thing. We are from UI5 side, we are also thinking of opening up the way how the test discovery works, so that it's a standard kind of a standardization available, how you can detect which kind of tests are there, and then this would also open up the space for having even more test runners around, because test runners are, it's a matter of choice. It's also what you are comfortable with, yeah. And it should fit to your environment, and that's also why this variety or this choice should be possible, that it's something for you to choose which fits best for you.
We see we have two excellent solutions. So thanks to both of you for presenting your options and for creating them. So the UI5 community is strong here and providing two strong alternatives. That's awesome to see. And I think we should really wrap up this. Goodbye.
All the best.
Thanks all. Bye.